It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Wednesday midweek edition of the program. Thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. And, of course, as always, big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast as well. Well, today on the program, we got a good one. Lots of big topics. We're going to talk markets with Jody Lawrence, based out of Nashville, Tennessee. We've had Jody on the show before. Looking forward to hearing from him. We got Senator Rob Black. He's going to talk about Bill S-230. Now, this is essentially a soil health act that is starting in the Senate. He's tabled it last week. And Senator Black has always been a big proponent of soil health and now trying to bring some legislation to it. We'll get the details on that. I'm also going to ask him about 202. And what's going on with this, essentially this bill, this piece of legislation that would protect supply management in future trade negotiations. And it breezed through the House, breezed through the Senate. And I want to hear from Senator Black on why that's happened. And we'll also talk to Chris Vervaet. He is with the Canadian Oilseed Producer Processing Association, I should say, COPA. Last week we had those RVO on the bio-based diesel, about we are above, right? We're at 5.65. We were above the expectation of 5.25 that the industry was asking for. So that was a pleasantly surprised moment for things like renewable diesel. It's been quite bullish for soybean oil. What does it mean for canola? I think there's some good news, some concerning news. There's kind of a good news, bad news sandwich there, and we'll get the Canadian perspective on what the impact is to canola from Chris Vervaet today on the program. Looking forward to chatting with him as he represents COPA. Okay, if you have any feedback on today's program, we'd love to hear from you. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Well, tough loss last night. And, I'm talking about the Oilers losing, not UCLA in the College World Series. But so I got to be careful, make sure I clarify which sport we're watching here. Tough loss for the Oilers last night. And I texted a few diehard Oiler fans, good friends, and said, it's 2 years in a row they lost in the final to the Panthers. And I said, you kind of get it. You're so close. You kind of get that feeling with the Buffalo Bills. Could you imagine the Buffalo Bills went to 4 straight Super Bowls and lost them all? Yeesh. And as the Panthers flooded the ice, you could see the Oilers, and of course the cameras were very focused on Draisaitl and McDavid, but just sitting there and grinding out and watching the Panthers celebrate again. 2 years in a row, they win the Cup at home in Miami. This year, Game 6. Last year, Game 7. And, one thing I've seen a lot of Oiler fans really admit is, and I think this is, takes kind of fan maturity. You kind of know when you're beat. Man, Florida's good. They are like, and somebody pointed out to me last night, they only finished the regular season 2 points ahead of the Flames, who didn't even make the playoffs, by the way. That team is just loaded and built for the playoffs. Like, they are heavy. Kelvin and I were texting back and forth, and we, I suggested they kind of remind me of the Dallas Stars of the 90s. Remember, like, the Zuboff and Hatcher and Mike Modano, those years where also the Oilers couldn't beat them? There's some irony there. They kind of remind me of those Ken Hitchcock Dallas Star teams. They play heavy and they just tilt the ice and they suffocate you. and they're skilled enough to score. They create some good scoring chances, and yeah, just the Oilers were beat. So tough loss for the Oilers. I know it's very heartbreaking for a lot of the Oilers fans that are listening to the show, and I feel for you. I wasn't, hey, I'm a Flames fan. I'm not going to say that I was heartbroken, but I do feel for you because it is so hard when you're that close. Hey, I am still arguing about the target, that targeting call that in that ASU Texas game in the Peach Bowl. So yeah, and that was back in January. My son Caleb and I are still talking about it. Anyway, let's get back to agriculture. Let's take a break. When we come back, we've got Chris Vervaet from COPA joining us. We're talking biofuels and canola. Pay attention to that. Lots of opportunities. We'll talk about all the details when we come back. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147. Built on over 100 years of seed innovation and unwavering commitment to farmers, Pioneer 100 Series canola hybrids deliver a step change in yield performance and agronomic traits. This isn't just better canola. It's different canola. Pioneer 100 Series. Contact your local Pioneer sales representative or visit pioneer.com/100 series to learn more today.
If you only listen to RealAg Radio, you only get half the picture. For greater insight into the issues that affect farming, tune in to RealAgriculture.com. Crops, livestock, machinery, farm management and the markets, even food and travel. Real Agriculture Online digs deeper into the topics that affect the way you work and live. So get connected today. Read, watch, and listen to the people who know at realagriculture.com.
Peter Johnson at Wheat Pete, RealAgriculture.com, and what an opportunity! Oh my gosh! You think you can't grow better wheat? You are absolutely wrong. We're going to show you how to strive for those record wheat yields that they get in the UK and in New Zealand. You can grow 150 bushel wheat. I'll show you how.
Catch Wheat Pete's Word every Wednesday on RealAgriculture.com or download the podcast on iTunes or Spotify. And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147 Sirius XM. From nutrient management to the latest weather, market, and ag trends, The Dirt, an economics podcast, is your place for farm-smart topics to boost your profitability. Join Mike Howell on Season 3 of The Dirt podcast, available now at nutrien-economics.com. Well, last week we had an announcement on those RVOs, and a lot of excitement in the biofuel community, I think, in North America. Obviously, from a soybean perspective, we've seen soybean oil on a real tear because of that news. But what does all this mean for canola? And of course, that's what we talk about here on RealAg Radio. And we'll get into it with Chris Vervaet. He is the head of COPA. How are we doing today, Chris?
Doing great. Thanks for having me, Shaun.
Hey, yeah, great to chat with you. So I guess overall, the RVO number was actually above. If you do some of the calculations, we're actually higher than what some of the expectations were. I guess from a canola perspective in your membership in Canada, are you satisfied with what you heard last week?
Well, there's always details to unpack, and I look forward to doing a little bit of that with you today. But I think if we zoom out and look at this high level, we are very encouraged to see what was proposed last week by the EPA. Those volumes that were proposed better align with the actual reality of production capacity for biomass-based diesel in the United States. And that's something that industry has been asking for quite some time. So to see the proposed rule actually reflect reality, again, is very encouraging, I think, for fuel producers and for feedstock providers alike.
Now, Canadian canola is considered a domestic feedstock, but it looks like there's a little bit of a catch here. In terms of it's like 50% of the RIN value. Explain that to people.
Yeah, so this is, again, looking at some of the details behind those large RVOs. We do see a new requirement being spelled out or being proposed on what value of a RIN, and a RIN is that credit that is traded within the renewable fuel standard marketplace in the United States. That's what fuel producers want. They want to see that RIN. They want to see a maximum RIN value. What's being proposed in the rule is that the RIN value for any imported fuel or any fuel made from imported feedstock would have a 50% haircut on that RIN value. So from our perspective, Shaun, that is unfortunate. Again, notwithstanding my comment that at a high level, seeing these RVOs be as large as they are is very good news. But this is the unfortunate piece of what is being proposed.
Does that disadvantage Canadian processors or the crush industry in Canada?
Yeah, it does. So if you take a 50% haircut on these credit values, and again, it's those credit values that the fuel producers want. That is what they're all after, to maximize those credit values. So if we can't, as a foreign feedstock, generate the same credit value for fuels produced from Canadian canola versus domestic canola or domestic soybeans, that is a significant competitive disadvantage for us.
But because the RVO is I guess a number above what was expected, you think there's going to be enough demand that it's still going to pull some of that Canadian product into the U.S. system?
Yeah, I think that's part of the story. I think there's also room for optimism. Just again, looking at a higher level.
Yeah.
When you see the volumes that are being proposed, again, aligning with what production capacity is in the States, that's going to, the way it's currently proposed, draw more domestic feedstock like soybean oil, for example, perhaps into the fuel sector, which creates just more opportunity for other vegetable oils to perhaps fill some gaps. So there's going to be room for canola oil to maybe take a bigger piece of the market share in the food business, for example. And I want to emphasize that, and keep using the same wording, right? This is a proposed rule. This is not cemented yet. There's still opportunity from our perspective to see some changes to how they might look at Canadian canola, for example. And the rule that was proposed last Friday, the rule itself, Shaun, is 290 pages long. And then you look into the details of how they came up with these numbers. That's an additional 400 pages. So we're still reading the details, but there's some, let's call it encouraging language in the rule itself with regards to direct mention of Canadian canola, the opportunities that it provides for fuel producers in the United States. We have a lot more supply to offer in the years ahead. We're a predictable trading partner. So these are all arguments that we're going to be looking to make before this rule gets finalized, with the hope that we do see canola treated on a level playing field.
Yeah, one of the observations or takeaways that, I've kind of asked a lot of people about is the fact that, because of the acre differences, canola is one of the crops where there is a big acre difference, and it's in Canada's favor compared to the U.S. Now, there's a lot of opportunities for U.S. grown canola going forward, especially from a genetic standpoint, winters or springs. But having the ability to pull Canadian canola or Canadian oil into the U.S. market, it gives the U.S. acre for canola some scale in this game, right? Where you're now not talking about 1-2 million acres. You're talking about something that's over 20.
Absolutely. And the way that we view this, and I think many of our U.S. partners in agriculture view it the same way, there's a real opportunity here on both sides of the border when it comes to biofuel policy development to take what I like to call a Fortress North America approach, Shaun. So these types of policies are being developed on both sides of the border with an intention to help support agriculture, to support energy security, to support jobs, value-added processing, whether that's fuel or feedstock processing. These are all part of why these types of policies and regulations are being created, again, between Canada and the United States. So our hope, and we start to see this from some of the language and the positions from our U.S. partners as well, is to take more of a North America approach, right? Whether it's on feedstock or fuels. But for the purposes of our conversation today, when I talk about that concept of North America or Fortress North America, for example, we believe there's opportunity there for Canadian canola to carve out some type of an exemption or perhaps a change to the proposed rule that, again, allows us to compete on a level playing field.
Yeah, and of course, 45Z is something that you've been working on a lot too, but we still don't have all that ironed out as well, especially relative to those carbon intensity scoring.
Yeah, that's a moving target, both technically, like you flag from a carbon intensity perspective, but also 45Z and changes to that particular provision in the IRA is a live discussion, literally, as we speak within the Senate as part of that tax reconciliation package that's moving through the system. So there's also some changes coming there that we are very mindful of and keeping abreast on.
Now, Chris, I get a whole bunch of emails on both sides of the issue when it comes to some of these biofuel programs. I've always said there's a difference in the attitude towards biofuels in the U.S. versus Canada, and I think we've even done some research work I think that sheds light on some of that. I had a piece of feedback. I think I read it on yesterday's show where somebody said, "Okay, like I get it." But it just feels like market interference. Like just we're getting in the middle of supply and demand. Why are some of these programs and incentives, whether tax credits or other mechanisms, why are they important for the biofuel industry?
Yeah, fundamentally, they're important because when we talk about biofuels, it's about transitioning, right? So you're transitioning from fossil fuels to something that is renewable, better for the environment. And often when you are transitioning from fuel sources, or diversifying is perhaps the better word to use, fuel sources, sometimes you do need a little bit more encouragement and incentives to do that. So that's really why you need to see levels of regulation, policy, and incentives to help drive the market.
Yeah. So from your perspective, there's some things you'd like to see maybe altered. There's also definitely some positives. From your perspective, representing the Canadian crushers, do you see last week's news as a net positive or a net negative?
Good question. Again, we're still combing through all the details, but I'll go back to where we started our conversation at that high level. That proposed volume for 2026, that's 5.6 billion gallons from where it was or where it is today, which is just north of 3 billion gallons. That is a net positive. There's consensus really that this is something that we view as a positive step, those volumes being proposed at the levels that they are.
Yeah. And just everybody's information, the expectation, the ask from the industry was 5.25. That's
right.
Right. So kind of blew through that, in Wall Street terms, blew away earnings. And, I think there's a lot of positivity.
Yeah. And maybe really to put it into terms that I think everyone can understand, when you see these types of volumes being proposed, it creates demand. It creates demand for soybean oil. It creates demand for canola oil. It creates demand for all feedstock. And, that presents all kinds of interesting opportunities for our value chain.
Hey, Chris, before I let you go, any other issues, there has to be, that you want to bring up from the crusher standpoint? What's going on in the market?
Yeah, I think it's worth noting that we are obviously keeping a very close eye on how things evolve in the United States. We look forward to working with our U.S. partners on the details of the RVO, where we hope things will land on 45Z as well. But we can't lose sight of our own domestic market, right? So this is something that is absolutely critical, that we continue to see a strong demand signal federally. So we're encouraged to see that the clean fuel regulation does have life. That's something that we have been advocating for over the last, for many years now, just to make sure that that type of demand signal stays in place. So that's a positive, but there's still some other details that need to be sorted out in our own backyard on biofuel policy for sure. We need that to be more durable. So regardless of political stripe and the next election cycle, it's critical to see that type of policy stay in place. And then we need to sort out some of the details on, well, what kind of feedstock is going to be used to service the Canadian biofuel market. Again, we really support a North American approach. The way our U.S. partners are talking about feedstock, they call it a ring fence, right, for North America feedstock. Yeah. We think that makes sense in the context of a Canadian biofuel program as well. Again, Fortress North America, ring fence, whatever you want to call it. But these programs must be designed to really help agriculture.
You know, a lot of times we talk about supply chain integration, right? And I've talked a lot about complementary supply chains. And, you know, a lot of times we talk about that from a beef and pork perspective. But I think it's lost on a lot of people how much both countries rely on each other when it comes to biofuels, whether it's, you know, it's the feedstock, it's the processing. You know, Canada's the largest purchaser of U.S. ethanol. Of course, Canadian canola is very critical to the future of bio-based diesel in the U.S. is one example. So again, I think it's just, it proves itself. Trade can work. And we've talked a lot about Fortress North America here too. So the audience here gets it very much.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. And maybe just to build on that last point you made, literally millions of dollars worth of feedstock and finished fuels crisscross the border every day between the U.S. and Canada. So yeah, that Fortress North America ring fence approach to biofuels makes so much sense.
Great stuff. Hey, Chris, thanks a lot for joining us here today. I know you squeezed us in. You got a bunch of meetings going on in Winnipeg. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity.
Hey, we'll be right back on RealAg Radio right after this.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by Mazik Seeds and Lalamon Plant Care.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is a video series that showcases the latest in canola research and production agronomy. Learn from some of the best at your own pace through quick and timely producer-focused videos available on our YouTube channel. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is the quickest way to keep up to date on all the latest in canola production. Boost your canola IQ with the Canola School, brought to you by BASF, and visit canolaschool.com.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147 Sirius XM. We've got a new bill coming out of the Senate. It is the National Strategy for Soil Health Act. And here to talk about it is somebody that's, has been a huge proponent of soil health and developing a national soil health strategy. It is Senator Rob Black. Senator Black, thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much, Shaun. It's great to be back with you today.
Yeah, so talk about the significance of this. What are we trying to accomplish with this bill starting in the Senate?
So this was inspired because of the report that was tabled back in June of 2024 and the 25 recommendations, many of which were accepted by government in some fashion. And so as we approached the start of a new parliament, I decided we should put in place a bill that would hopefully mandate government to develop a national soil health strategy. And it incorporates many of the recommendations that are contained in the report.
Yeah, so we know that many producers they're already implementing soil conservation practices. There's a lot of examples of that. We featured a lot of that on Real Agriculture just as an example. But how will this strategy and piece of legislation, if it does become law, how does it recognize and support the on-the-ground work farmers are already doing to maintain soil health on their farms?
So I don't ever want to discount the great work that's being done by farmers, the research that has been done and is being done by farmers as they develop and then undertake effective strategies. They're leaders in their field, and we need to acknowledge that. I think it's imperative for these early adopters and innovators to be included in the development of a strategy and be considered as a strategy is developed. It includes the bill, if it's passed, let's say when it passes, includes provisions to support education, training, and sharing of information, all of which are important for farmers that want to do more and farmers that are also producers that are also doing good things now. It's meant to highlight the great work that's being done and encourage more peer-to-peer networks and knowledge sharing. So I don't think it discounts the work that's being done. I think it'll build on what is happening out there across the country.
Yeah. Do you see there being financial incentives or like cost sharing programs to try to provide that carrot to help producers adopt or expand some of the things that they're doing in this area of sustainable soil practices?
So Senate bills cannot appropriate or allocate funds. Right. So this bill does not do that. It's to develop a framework, a national strategy, identifying policy and legislative measures. What I hope coming out of that, though, might be further things that would be then government led bills or recommendations. So really, I'd like to see government, through a strategy, acknowledge that soil is a national strategic national asset. Let's get that right first and develop those tasks and actions that will move this thing forward. One of them may in fact be, or many of them may in fact be, further dollars that would go into it.
You know, it's interesting because there's probably some people listening to this and saying, okay, like I get the national, we do, you know, a national soil health strategy sounds like something I can get behind. Why do we need a bill to, like, how is that connected? What's the why behind needing that legislation? Is it you need the legislation in order to make the, you know, to give the initiative for the national strategy, or what's at work here? Explain this. How is the sausage made here? You need to explain.
So the bill would mandate the government to collaborate with other ministers, the ag minister, to collaborate with other ministers federally, provinces and territories, indigenous communities, organizations nationally and provincially, to undertake the development of a strategy. So my goal is that I think this is sort of the kickstart, right? We heard back from government to the response to the report was, yeah, it's all good, and, you know, we've started to do this. Well, I think this just kickstarts it even further, right? So that's my goal, is to see some things take place, right? You know, 41 years ago, the first soil health report, things got moving along, and then times change and things like that. And 40 years later, we've got to do more, and we don't have another 40 years to move forward. The UN FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, says that in 2021, 30% of our world's soils were depleted where we couldn't grow anything. And they have said that by 2050, that could be as high as 90%. That's 25 years from now. We've got to do something, and we've got to do it right. And this, I hope, will be the kickstart.
Yeah, no, I know you've traveled across the country, and you see the variability. And one of the hang-ups when we talk national strategy on anything, you know, I've interviewed a lot of people that make this fatal error, is that it's sort of like, you know, we got to keep it simple. National strategy, same for everybody. In this case, tell me we're recognizing the variability across the country, depending on what kind of soil. We have a lot of soil types.
Absolutely. And the report a year and 12 days ago that was tabled speaks directly to that, right? It says that we need regional policies, we need regional programs, and we recognize that in the 18 months that we heard testimony. So that's front and center. I hope that will be that will come out loud and clear as the strategy is developed. It has to. It absolutely has to. We can't have a one-size-fits-all. We don't. We won't have a one-size-fits-all.
So back on June 10th, you tabled Bill S-230 is the number. Any pushback? Like, I guess I'm trying to sort out what people would argue against here. It all seems to kind of fit. Happy. Who can't be happy about soil?
Well, that's my hope as well, right? June 10th, I tabled it. I spoke to it last Thursday at second reading. It was adjourned to another group, and my hope is, given other things that are happening in the Senate this week and next, it may not get spoken to until the fall. But I, like you, I don't know who would object to this. It's motherhood and apple pie, but it is something that we have to think about. And so my hope is there won't be a lot of pushback. I was out at an ICA agriculture summit in your neck of the woods earlier this week, and spoke to it with the 200 that were in the room and the more than 700 that were online. And again, lots of positive feedback, right? Because it is what it is.
Yeah. I just want to ask you before, I know we're short on time here. I got to ask you about Bill 202, which is the piece of legislation that's attempting to protect supply management in future trade negotiations. We used to, in the prior parliament, it was 282. There was a lot of fighting and, negotiating and amendments and pushback to the House. And there was a lot of political drama that attached to that bill. 202, though, has breezed through the House and also the Senate. I guess I'll ask for a lot of our audience. Then we have audience members on both sides of this, positive and negative. Very emotional topic. Why the breeze through? What's that work here?
So the Senate acknowledged in the third reading debates yesterday and the days in the past that it had passed twice through the House, through the voted House of Commons. And so at the end of the day, my colleagues felt that if members of Parliament had essentially approved it twice, we really couldn't push back in any great way. At the end of the day, there were some speeches last night that spoke out and tried to bring forward the issues that were raised, as you said, in the previous 282. But it did pass on division. So it was a voice vote, passed on division, which means that not everybody was in favor of it. But at the end of the day, majority would have passed had there been a standing vote. So I think there'll be opportunities to move it forward and move around it. That's all I know.
Yeah. Any other ag files that you're kind of working on right now as it applies to the Senate?
No, not at this point. Committees are just being formed as we speak this week and next in the Senate chamber. I hope to be back as chair of Ag Committee, Ag and Forestry Committee, if all goes well. Stay tuned. But we will get started again likely come fall, right? I just don't think there's enough runway between now and the end of sitting. That being said, we have AgFo in the previous parliament completed the witness testimony for a wildfire study, and we need to get it out there. I mean, we'll have missed this calendar year for it, but we heard lots of good ideas, and so we want to get that finished, and I'm hopeful we can move that forward over the summer on Ag Committee and then back to the Senate in the near term.
Yeah, the wildfires have definitely impacted agriculture as well. On top of all the communities that displaced, it is definitely been a big challenge. And at one point, you were the sole ag senator. You got some you got some company now.
Oh, it's great to have Senators Mary Robinson and Todd Lewis in the chamber, and I think we make a great team. Todd coming from Saskatchewan, a grain farmer. Mary coming from Prince Edward Island. Ag services, and a farmer in their own right. So certainly, I think we make a great team.
Yeah, with three, you could probably find some other friends and have like a Senate Ag Caucus. Like you got your
Who knows?
Get together every Wednesday. Oh, Senator Black, thanks so much for joining us here today. I do appreciate it very much and look forward to keeping track of this Senate bill based on the National Soil Health Strategy. Thanks so much.
Thanks very much.
We'll be right back on RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, right after this. I get to spend every day talking to farmers in the ag industry through RealAgriculture.com and RealAg Radio. But nothing is more fun than speaking to an audience live and in person. If you're planning an ag event, book a Real Agriculture speaker to make it a successful and memorable experience. Email shaney@realagriculture.com and you can book myself or any other Real Ag personality to speak at your event. Bring your audience all the fun, insight, and energy of Real Agriculture.
It's summertime, and you've got a lot of important decisions to make when it comes to your corn crop. Let the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com help guide you through those big decisions with input from leading experts in the field. If it's spray timing, disease identification, or any other field issue, the Corn School's got you covered. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com. Brought to you by BASF and Pride Seeds.
Let's talk markets here on Real Ag Radio. We're joined right now by Jody Lawrence, based out of Nashville, Tennessee. His company is Strategic Trading Advisors. Hey, Jody, how we doing?
I'm good, Shaun. How you doing so far? And now that we're more than almost halfway through the year, and June is 18th, and U.S. pollination's coming up. This year couldn't go by any faster.
Oh, you know what? I was having a glass of wine with my mom last night, and she said, "Hey, next week, the days start getting shorter." Like, oh my, what? How is that possible? Anyway.
Yeah, I guess summer starts Friday. So, we're 2 days away from. See, I think it should go the other way. If summer starts, the days should continue to get longer.
I'm right there with you. Like, I don't want to have to think about, we're just getting into the warmer part of the year. I don't want to have to start dealing with shorter days. Man, we're just kind of getting going here. Hey, Jody, have you ever been to Quebec City?
Have not. Been to Toronto, been to Vancouver, and been to Montreal, but not Quebec City.
See, that needs to be on your list. Well, hey, the seed industry in Canada is going to be getting together July 7th through the 9th at the Hilton Quebec in Quebec City for insightful speakers, insights into the latest industry trends, regulatory changes, and technological advancements that are shaping the future of the seed sector. Register today for the 2025 Seeds Canada annual conference. You can do that by going to seeds-canada.ca/annual conference. Okay, Jody, let's get into the markets here. Okay. If I was to ask you, a farmer walks in to your office today, they're in Nashville, and they said, "Jody, what's going on in these markets?" What are you telling them?
Well, I think the first thing I have to tell them is I always tend to tell them, okay, here's the bad news. We'll finish with the good news. And what we think has happened, because if you just look at the July-December corn spread, the industry really expected with, a fairly tight ending stocks number for corn, that you would have a nice premium to sell old crop of July over December. And we did up until, maybe a month, 6 weeks ago. And now July is an inverse to December. And the hard part about that is what that probably means, and what the cash market's telling us is there's more corn out there from last year's crop, from the 24 crop, that potentially the USDA and WASDE, that they underestimated what was out there, because the cash markets would not be acting like this if the true carryout was down in the 1.4s like they told us it was. And then when you move on to, that's the bad news for corn, is we've kind of kicked the market while it was down, because with the potential of 96 million acres plus, we have exceptional crop ratings. This time of year, we have no weather issues, and only spotty and small regional weather issues in the U.S. Corn Belt as far as moisture concerns, that we're heading into pollination in as good a position as the U.S. crop has been in years and maybe decades. And with that, last year, I always point to is kind of the double-edged sword of agriculture, because production agriculture is extremely, cannibalistic. And what I mean by that is there are no farmers or anyone in the business listening to your show who go, well, this year I just want to have an average crop. I don't want to do anything special. I don't want to try anything new. I don't care if my brother-in-law beats me. This is just average year for me. Everybody goes out, they make changes. Everybody in the industry, you look at the new technology on all the equipment that comes out. You look at the new genetics. You just gave the plug for the seed form that's going to come up. They're going to be talking about new genetics, new traits, things like this. And you add all this together, even after last year's weather was, nowhere near as good to this point as the 25 weather has been. And we still had even though they cut it, it's probably closer to 179, 180, a record crop. And that always opens the potential with this. If we have no issues, all the way through Labor Day, the U.S. could produce a 183, 184 national yield on 96 million acres.
That's a lot of corn.
That's a lot of corn, 16 billion bushels. And it's an enormous accomplishment. And it's something everybody should be congratulated for that's in the industry for moving everything forward. But at some point, with the rising cost of land and just the rising cost inside the industry, the higher cover charge just to get in to plant an acre of corn or beans or wheat, canola, oats, anything, that the margins are shrinking by the day. And then you run into the problem, okay, well, I've got to produce more to make everything, make all my ends meet. And what happens, you just end up with more bushels that drives the price down further.
But we're not out of the weather. Like, I've been hearing a few weather forecasts concerned about, now that we're moving into some, the pollination period, concerned about how hot some of this summer could be, and maybe some of the dryness in a state like Iowa. So we're not out of the woods yet, are we?
Oh, no, it certainly, because we've seen some flash droughts start into July and August that begin to take. First of all, they trim more bean yield than they do corn, but they take the high top end yield out of corn. So we're not out of it by a long shot. But if you look at the drought index and you look at subsoil moisture, we have a much broader safety net this year to put up with that kind of stress than we have in years past. But it's never over till it's in the bin. I completely agree. But my concern is always, there was a lot of farmer optimism in all the meetings. You and I have talked about this, that we both attended and that we spoke at individually, that, look at, you have all these weather models that are projecting hot, dry, and we're overdue for not a 2012 catastrophe type drought, but, something along the lines that certainly we go back below trend on yield. But to this point, all those models have missed it because they didn't see all the rain that we've gotten. And we're counting on somebody predicting the future in February to try to be optimistic and build a marketing plan around. And we all know better than that. Unfortunately, we do hold out hope because we know how quickly these markets can move. If we get 7 days of no rain and 96-degree weather right in the middle of pollination for some of the biggest producing states.
Okay, so it feels like that's a lot of the bad news. What's the good news?
Well, the good news is the EPA ruling. I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Well, I was going to say trade and exports, but you mentioned the EPA last week on the RVOs.
Yeah, the EPA and the RVOs, you really have to look at this because we spoke, a lot of what I talked about in 2024 was the optimism for sustainable aviation fuel, the expansion of the biofuel, especially on the soy diesel part of it, that it could start to fill the domestic, the North American oil market, whether it's canola, whether it's bean oil, whatever it is, that you could start to see more and more internal demand, domestic demand towards that, just like we saw 20 years ago with ethanol for corn. And they missed several opportunities. They were allowing all of the imports of the used cooking oil, that they didn't shut down that loophole. But now it appears, shockingly, that Secretary Zelnick, who was against all of the biofuel, and has been his entire career, all of a sudden, the industry came in and gave him kind of a best case scenario of, this would really be helpful if you gave us these big numbers. And nobody thought they'd ever do it, but they came awfully close by proving it. Now, there's some other things, the small refinery exemptions, the SREs, and obviously it's not done yet because the way Washington works, everybody knows that nothing happens quickly. But that really could be something. And if you look at beans, especially, where we have kind of bounced back to, you think about how big South America's crop was, and more acres and more yield and everything great out of Argentina and Brazil. The beans still have a 10 in front of them. It's shocking to me. Even though the U.S. acreage was down a little bit, this is the kind of thing that domestically, while the price of beans may dip below $10, if the basis stays great, you're getting a net that you're still getting a good price for them. So I'm excited about the EPA and the RVOs because it's so early in this administration. This isn't kind of a walkout thing that a new administration or a new election could just end immediately with an executive order. So I'm optimistic about that because, domestic demand is all anybody ever asked for.
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking to Jody Lawrence, strategic trading advisors based out of Nashville, Tennessee. And we'll continue this conversation when we come back after a very quick break. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomists, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomists with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
How's your seed quality? What should you treat with? What about herbicide carryover and environmental concerns? Spring is here, and you've got a lot of things to think about in regards to your pulse crop. The Pulse School on Real Agriculture has information and advice for all these questions and more to help you navigate this season. Brought to you by BASF. Pulse School episodes are available at pulseschool.com, realagriculture.com, or as a podcast on your favorite streaming service. Download the latest episode today.
We're talking to Jody Lawrence of Strategic Trading Advisors based out of Nashville, Tennessee. Hey, Jody, I'm going to ask you about wheat, but first let's stop over the livestock. Hogs and cattle, quite the run.
Yeah, cattle are coming off just 3-4 years. And I guess it really started back during COVID because the herd management, and everybody thought COVID would kill the beef market because all the restaurants were shut down because nobody was going out. But what happened, everybody realized they could get a better cut of meat from their local butcher or their grocery store, go home and cook it, and be half price of what they were paying for a lesser cut of meat. And you look at the red meat protein market, especially in cattle and beef, it has been on fire since late COVID. So let's just call it 21, and new all-time highs in feeder cattle, live cattle, and live futures and live cattle cash trade earlier this month. And just like any market that gets there becomes some gravity that you get these big pullbacks like yesterday, but certainly the health of that industry with the lowest number on feed, and depending on how you look at the numbers in 10 to 20 years in the United States, you got a good economy. Obviously, you've got issues in the Middle East that may cool off some people's outlook for the world economy, but cattle and hog market certainly look strong. And the only thing, the cattle market takes so much longer to get a turn to, add feeders and then put more box beef out. But the hog market probably is heading towards a restock situation where you're going to have more feeder coming out within the next 6 to 8 months. So anybody that is raising hogs or doing contract hog business, there are going to be some great hedging opportunities coming up.
Yeah, well, and on top of that, we started off talking about corn, and if we've got 96 million acres of corn, we're going to be plus 180 on the yield. There may be some feed around that the livestock feeders, the price, they may like the price that they're going to be feeding those animals out for. Not good for corn, but good for livestock.
You kind of have double-edged sword here because you look at soy meal. When bean oil took off on the EPA RVO announcement, the bean meal market crashed. So, if you have high margins in the livestock business and you have falling feed costs, that's a great dynamic for some herd expansion. So
yeah. Hey, before we wrap up here quickly, I wanted to hit on wheat. Wheat's having a positive day. What's going on in the trade here today on wheat?
Well, I think you have a couple things. You had the funds in a record net short position heading into harvest, and the trouble in the Middle East. I think the wheat market is starting to realize that if the U.S. gets involved and it does escalate to a point where, any of the other Arab neighbors, the major exporters or the major importers, and, you look at Russia and Ukraine, their problem certainly isn't solved, that the wheat market had absolutely zero risk premium in it and every major fund on the same side of the boat. And today, between all the contracts, they're up 15 to 22 cents. I think today is really just a money movement day, because you've got July 1st notice day next week, so you got people rolling to September or Dec. But you also there is some concern in that market. You're up at levels right now. Everybody should profits certainly should be a lot better heading into the winter wheat harvest, which typically over the next 6 weeks, the seasonal's pretty bearish. And the crop ratings for the U.S. are good. So U.S. yields so far have been at expectations, if not a little better. It's one of those things, if you have wheat, a great mentor of mine told me a long time ago, said, if you get a big rally in wheat, unless you have a shocking event like Russia invading Ukraine or just a catastrophic weather event somewhere, that it's grown on every continent except Antarctica, and it gets replenished twice as fast as corn or beans. So that's what you always have to take about where you get your opportunities to hedge your wheat. The U.S. soft, over 30 cents in the last two sessions, and I realized the why and that it could go higher. It always can go higher. I would love for this to be the lowest sale of the year, but we're still, even with this big rally, anywhere between 60 and 80 cents below the earlier year highs and the late 24 highs. So we know, and wheat is in a good position right now. So it's definitely a hedging opportunity, and that's what I'm recommending to my customers.
Yeah, well, if we can close above 650 on that September spring wheat, that's going to, I think, be looked upon as a bit of a positive. Hey, Jody, thanks a lot for joining us here today. I do appreciate it.
Absolutely, Shaun. Always good to talk to you, and wish everybody well as summer starts on Friday.
That was Jody Lawrence with Strategic Trading Advisors. Well, if you have any feedback on today's show, we'd love to hear from you. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Or, of course, you can always call that Real Ag feedback line, 855-776-6147. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with Real Ag Radio. And we'll chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.